Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Book Broadcast. I am your host, Allie, with the Right Place, Right Time, my virtual boutique of book coaching and ghostwriting services for badass and brilliant folks ready to change the world with their stories. And here on the Open Book Broadcast, we talk about everything and anything writing and publishing, all the spaces in between, and we are an open book about it. And today, my guest, who is freaking fantastic, oh so brilliant and badass, is Lisa Hammett. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Before we dive into all of the things that are fabulous about Lisa, I am going to read her bio so that you get all of the details about how freaking awesome and phenomenal she is. So Lisa is an international best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and a success coach, helping stressed and burnt out business owners and executives develop mental fitness, manage stress and anxiety, and get healthy. After 26 years in the corporate retailing industry, she reached burnout. I mean, honestly, who the hell wouldn't? God bless you for even making it to 26 years. She left the corporate sector in 2005 and started her wellness journey, losing 65 pounds. Since November of 2011, she has been a health and wellness coach for a global wellness company, helping thousands of members create sustainable, healthy habits, losing weight, and maintaining their weight loss. She launched her success coaching practice in May of 2020 to help individuals struggling with stress, mindset, and weight gain. In 2021, she completed an intensive global coaching program with HPC, High Performing Coach. She is currently working on her positive intelligence mental fitness certification. Her international best-selling book, From Burnout to Best Life, How to Take Charge of Your Health and Happiness, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other distribution channels. Yeah. Lisa.
Yay.
Oh my gosh.
Yay.
Okay. So where to even begin? All right. So let's talk about 26 years in corporate retail and reaching burnout. Like I mean, we can make a lot of assumptions, but who wants to do that? We know what the word assume means. So tell us, what are the nuts and bolts of that story? 26 years in burnout.
Oh gosh. Well, for those of you who have been in the retail industry or anything related to dealing with the public, it is very fast moving, very stressful. Obviously, the economy plays a big factor in it. And I went into it really after college as just got a job. I mean, I wasn't looking at it as a full-time career, but because when I was young, it was fun and fast paced. And so I thought this is fun and I promoted quickly. And then it just started to take a toll because you work every holiday, you work nights, you work weekends. And even when you go into the corporate office, which I did and was a buyer and a merch planner and the whole bit, it really takes a toll. I mean, that it is so stressful. And after that period of time, basically 26 years, I felt like I'd hit a wall. I was done. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so stressed out. I was having like stomach issues, chronic migraines. I was grossly overweight. I was having relationship challenges. It was just not a good situation. So I just exited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the
Yeah.
stress shoe fits, you take it off. I mean, yeah, I think what's really interesting about anybody who can relate to the story, right? Like, which is so many of us, that we end up with the physical symptoms that are just manifesting what's happening emotionally and mentally, like, to us. I think anytime anybody's ever said like they're starting to experience, sleeplessness or chronic headaches or like things that they hadn't experienced before, like 9 times out of 10, what ends up being the case, right, is that people haven't taken care of the stress level or the anxiety or whatever it is. And so now it's just like seeping out of your pores.
Exactly. That's so true. We don't heed the warning signs and we have this misconception that, oh, we're invincible. And, I'm just going to brush that off. I don't have time to be sick. Oh, this is just bothersome. Well, they compound and then it gets to the point of where it's a serious wake up call.
Yeah.
Either emotionally or physically. You go to your doctor and your doctor says, okay, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke, or, it's just, unfortunately, we often allow ourselves to get to that point. And I did. And had I done a better job managing the stress, I wouldn't have just quit a 26-year career at a high paying salary and then went, oh crap, now how am I going to replace that salary,
Yeah.
causing hardship for many years. So
So tell us a little bit about that. I'm going to call it the gap period
Mhm.
between stress and success. Um, that can be your next book. Um,
I like
so
that. I might have to write that
you
down.
write it down. It's all for you.
What was
Um,
that again? I love that.
the gap year between stress and
Okay.
success. Um, so like what was that journey like? So you leave corporate. How many years was it before you so 2005 you left and then
Yeah.
2011? So it was all that time in between that you were like figuring it out?
Yes.
Okay.
So I started pretty quickly after leaving my personal health and wellness journey. So, it took me a year to lose the 65 pounds. And then I started health and wellness coaching. So that was, that coaching piece of it had been going on for like 11 years. But I was working for another company and I still work for them very part-time because I like the principles and a lot of the ways that I coach my clients are on those principles. So, I was developing that, but I went into direct selling as a way to make additional income. And it was a great training ground for self development. And it really helped me to feel like other things were possible.
Mm,
But it is,
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been in direct selling, but you work really, really hard for not a great salary.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
you can earn great trips, and I earned many great trips. And it was a good career, and I don't regret doing it, but it's a lot of work for not a lot of money. And
Yeah.
it, yeah, so that's kind of where I was at. And then during COVID, I had people approaching me from all different walks of life, people that I had known from retail, people I had known from health and wellness coaching, and just friends and direct selling. And they said, would you consider coaching me? I need some accountability. I am just having a really hard time here. I'm like, sure, I can do that. So that's really kind of how my personal business developed. And then I recognized that I really need to get certified as a life coach because, weight gain is just a byproduct of a bigger issue.
Mm,
So I went through that intensive
yeah.
program. And since actually April, I've been adding on the positive intelligence piece of it because I've just found it's a really great way to manage negative emotions, particularly stress in the moment.
Yeah.
So that's what I've added on. So that's kind of my journey.
Yeah, I love how these things kind of like intersect. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like in the retail industry, it was like, okay, you learned, that not taking care of yourself along the way only kind of like builds up things that need to happen. But then in your next kind of career move before starting your own practice, it's like you must have balanced that a lot better because of what you learned from the
Mhm.
26 years. And then, of course, what you learned during the time that you're working for somebody else you took on your own kind of like spin on things, right?
Mhm.
Which eventually elevated you into a place of like people coming to you and saying, will you coach me and teach me how to do these things that you've clearly become more successful at than I am? So all of this kind of like this tiered approach, right? Like building
Mhm.
off of each part of your journey, which I'm all about. Like I like to look at people's journeys and being like, thing that you went through earlier helped you with the next thing that you went through that was better. Um, but what I really want to go, this is where I want to go next, is about the positive intelligence. So tell people what that means. What is positive intelligence, and how do you marry it with your kind of like the stress reducing stuff, the weight loss stuff? Like, because if the weight loss is a byproduct of the stress,
Mhm.
then positive intelligence and your other kind of like things that you're teaching people with stress, right, is all kind of like working towards that as one thing.
Right, exactly. So I went through a free grant program, and that's how I even really found out about it. And I read, so the brainchild behind it is Shirzad Sharmin, and he wrote a best-selling book that was actually the number one best-selling book for like 2 years during the pandemic, entitled Positive Intelligence. And I read the book, and it's all based on like neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy. And you would think, oh my gosh, that would be a really tough read because it's so high level. It's written at a fifth grade reading level. It's very easy to understand. And it was so interesting. And I learned aspects about my personality that I just found really fascinating and why I'm reacting to certain things certain ways. So, again, more breakthroughs. So during that 6-week course that I went through, I started using some of the principles in positive intelligence, had such tremendous results personally, and also tested it on some of my clients, and they had huge, um, progress as well. So basically, what it is, it's based on, again, neuroscience, cognitive behavioral psychology, and it is the study of how your left brain, which is your analytical brain, actually was designed to handle one task at a time. And because as humans, we have this misconception that, oh, multitasking is such a great thing. It's fabulous. So we try to, which is so
Yeah.
overrated. So we try to do that, and it just causes us to spin out of control because our brains were not designed that way. In fact, IBM, the computer giant, they actually created multitasking for computers,
Mhm.
actually, as a process so that it can run multiple applications at the same time. So it was never designed for human consumption. So I share that with you because that's kind of how our brains operate. So all negative emotions that bubble up, whether it's stress, anxiety, fear, shame, blame, anger, all of that bubbles up from our left brain. And that's really our negative brain. And then our right brain, which is our positive brain, calm, clear headed, big picture, is really where we want to be most of the time. Because when we are making decisions and communicating through our right brain, we see the big picture. We're better communicators. We're not just reacting to a negative situation. So the science of positive intelligence is to develop what we call mental fitness. And what that does, it's to recognize those negative thought patterns that develop in our left brain, name them, call them out, and then intercept them so that you can easily transfer to your right positive brain so that you can make those better decisions, can improve your decision making and your relationships. And it's great for weight loss too, because negative thought patterns are basically emotional eating.
Mm.
That's what happens. So it's being able to recognize that, shut that down, and then move to the right brain where it's like, you know what, I don't want to make that choice. That's not a good choice. In the long term, that's not going to help me. But there's a technique where we engage our senses, and it takes like 10 to 15 seconds to do it. And I did a TEDx actually at the end of August, and I walked the audience through what like we call them PQ reps, what it does. And it's basically looking at something, like looking at something really intently so that it's like you're seeing it for the first time and noticing colors, shapes, textures, just focusing on that for like 10 to 15 seconds. And then focusing on something that you can hear. And it could be like a far distant passing sound, or it could be your breath. Again, 10 to 15 seconds. I do it in the morning with my mug of coffee because I love coffee. So I'm sipping it, I'm savoring the flavor, I'm smelling, the aroma, holding the warm mug, the sense of touch. And I'm doing that for like a minute. And what that does is it quiets your brain from all that emotional garbage that we tell
Mm.
ourselves, which is not
Yeah.
factual. And
Right.
it gets you to almost stop thinking. I mean, you're focusing on something, but you're not thinking really. It's more of just you're just there. You're present. You're fully present, ultimately, is what it is. And by doing this consistently, you can shift that negative energy to the positive. And you can do a lot of these things like in the moment. So, I help executives and senior business leaders. And, if they're in a business meeting or they're in front of a client and they're really triggered with something,
Mhm.
they can't just say, oh, excuse me, I need to go take a time out and do some deep breathing in the other room or
Right.
practice some yoga. They can't do that, but they could, use their sense of touch. Like they could, rub two fingers together, or they could focus on the iris of the eye of the person that they're looking at, and still like listening, but really staring at their eyes. So it's things like that. But it's interesting, and it's really the first tool that I have found that enables you to shift those emotions in the moment and really get positive results.
So I'm thinking about how many times like the clients that I work with get they get triggered by
Yeah.
what they're writing. So I tend to work with a lot of people who are working in memoir. And that's not to say that the people that I work with who do more thought leadership nonfiction don't get triggered when they're working on their books, because there's different things that come up, but definitely with people who are writing memoir. Um, so like walk me through how they would like apply this positive thinking. Like, so they're drafting, they get maybe emotionally triggered by a scene that they're going to write or a memory that they have that brings up a lot of shit for them. Like
Mhm.
in that moment, where do they turn to? What would be the thing that they would do to kind of get a hold on being present?
So that's when they would focus on their senses. And that's
Okay.
actually a really good question. So, and I'm going to preface it by when you're in your right brain, everything should be easy. I'm not saying that you don't work for something, but it's ease and flow. Whereas in your left brain, things are hard. So if you're
Mm,
doing or trying to do a task, like if you're writing something and you're just having writer's block and it's just, or you're stumbling over the words, you're in your left brain and you need to get
mm,
out of that because you can't see the big picture and you're not having full clarity. So you do the same process as you would if you are doing like a brain dump and doing that, but then you're starting to get agitated. So you could just focus in on, again, it could be one of your senses. I use my two fingertips often.
mhm,
And again, it's like feeling your fingertips, really feeling them, feeling like your nails, are your fingertips dry? What's the temperature? And I know I do this often before I go into speaking engagements. And it's calming because it kind of
mm,
it takes you out of your head. So it's the same thing. If that doesn't work for you, then focus on your breath or focus on something that you can hear or, you know, okay, lotion, stare
mm.
at this and really look at the
Yeah,
colors. I mean, it seems silly, but it gets you out of your head so that you can then get the big picture. So that's
yeah,
what they would do.
yeah. I love that. Now, what about when you were writing your own book? Did you use any positive intelligence while you were working or marketing from Burnout to Best Life?
Yes. Now I'll tell you, it's been kind of a process because I never thought that I would just write a book. I mean, I've always enjoyed writing, but I never thought it would materialize into a book. And during the pandemic, just through my networking, I was talking to people virtually, and I had multiple people who said, "You really should write a book. You have some great content," because I had started blogging. And they said, "You have enough content here. It needs to be organized and you need to add more meat to it, but you could turn this into a book." So, really, it was a process over a couple of years. And then when it got to the point of where I had to incorporate more of my story and really tie things together, absolutely. I was doing a lot of what we call PQ reps to kind of get that mental clarity because you can get really stressed out about it, especially if you're reaching a deadline, as you know,
Yeah.
because you're an author as well. And it's
Yeah.
really stressful sometimes where you're like, oh crap, I gotta get this done. And I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So what did you find to be the most challenging part of writing your book?
that's a really good question. Um I wouldn't say necessarily, it's just I was very ignorant. Let's just put it that way. I wouldn't say it was really challenging. I mean, yes, there were periods of where it flowed easier, but I was so naive that I thought, okay, well, you hire an editor. Okay. Yeah, I understand you need a graphic designer or somebody to design a cover, but that's pretty much it. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's like four different editors and,
Right.
proofreaders and all this stuff. And, so I had a good friend who's an artist and she did, I'll actually hold it up. So she did the fabulous artwork
Yeah. Such a
here.
great
She's
cover.
so talented. And then I had a graphic designer who put it all together into obviously the cover. Um, so it was just the ignorance. I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I went with a hybrid publisher because I knew that I didn't want to pitch it to like a big publishing house because I wanted to retain full rights to
Hmm.
it. Um, and I also wanted to learn as I went because I figured at some point I would write another book so that I wouldn't
Yeah.
have to go through necessarily all these different steps because I would know. And then I would have key relationships built that, could help me.
Right.
So anyways, that the ignorance part of it, and I'm So I should say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I like an overachiever, and I like to get things done. And sometimes they weren't happening fast enough for me. And that, I guess, bottom line, that was the biggest frustration for me because I was on other people's schedules. Once
Yeah,
I got everything done, and then you pass it
sure.
off to layout design, and you're kind of at other people's schedules, and you just got to let it go. You just got to let it go. It'll get done when it gets done, and everything, you know, worked out great. But there was
Right.
like a 2-month process where I'm just like, oh crap, this isn't going to get done on time. I'm telling people it's going to come out on this time. What am I going to do? Just creating a lot of unnecessary stress. So,
Yeah. Well, we put a lot of heart and soul into our books,
yes.
and it can be a very scary thing. Even if we have control over who we choose to publish with or how we choose to publish, when we involve other people, it's a scary thing, because
Mhm.
you're sending it onward to somebody else, and now your hands aren't on it, and you're expecting them to carry it the rest of the way. And if it's somebody that's new to you and you're not really sure the process, and yeah, I mean that's where I think like not knowing what to expect ends up kind of giving you heart palpitations, right? Because
Yeah.
your first time through it, you don't know anything. It's kind of like, to me, I always compare it to parenting. When you're first going through it, you're like, I don't know, I'm making shit up, like,
Yeah.
like, I'm not sure.
All you
Should I
can
accept
do.
that? Like, what does that rash mean? Should I call the doctor? Should I not? Should I, you
Am I
know,
overreacting? What am I
am I
doing?
overreacting? Yeah, exactly. Should I phone a friend? Should I
Yeah.
just call them? Should I just, I mean, like, there's just so many things that you process through, all because you care so deeply about what you've
Mhm.
produced and doing it well and doing right by it. So would you do it all again the same way, or what would you change? What would you do differently?
I don't think I would change anything. I mean, I think it was such a great learning process, and I'm glad I did it the way that I did it because I learned so much.
Yeah,
And yeah, I interviewed about, well, thanks to you, you connected me to quite a few people, and I like interviewed a couple different types of hybrid publishers,
yeah,
and I'm glad I went with the one that I did. And I'll tell you, I got frustrated sometimes because she kept kind of pushing back on me and which she should have. And it was good because that's how I forced myself to learn instead of like doing it for me. She was great at connecting. And if I had questions, absolutely I could go to her and she would, give me the answer or direct me somewhere. But it was great. It forced me to really learn the process. And I'm really thankful for that style. So no, I don't think I would change anything, actually.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I just feel like that's just the most beautiful thing because unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people in the industry with publishing houses and things that are just like out to snatch up people's money and crank out books as fast as they can. And it leaves a lot of unhappy people
Mhm.
who feel really jaded about what they originally thought was a wonderful, beautiful thing is like producing a book. So the fact that
Yeah.
you wouldn't change a thing is amazing. So what's been the most rewarding part of all of this?
I think that I just said I did it because,
Yeah.
when it was just kind of coming to kind of this rough idea. And then I really started saying early on this year, like January, February, I'm going to publish a book this year. I'm going to do it. And the fact that it actually happened, you know,
Yeah.
it, I, that is pretty awesome. And to actually see it, it's still just it's like surreal. My first book signing was so awesome. I had like over 75 people and there was a line to the door for like 2 hours, and I had it a good friend of mine owns a wine shop, and so we were doing wine tasting and everything, and to see the amount of people who came out to show support and who were just so excited for me, and it was really humbling
Yeah.
because you don't realize the kind of impact you have on people, and it was very humbling and
Oh my gosh.
awesome.
Okay, so I'm so glad that you just shared all of that. And I have a question for you. When you got started in working on your book, did you ever think, I don't know if this is going to matter to anyone?
I did kind of think about that. I guess, you go through that imposter syndrome thinking, oh, I don't know if I could write a legit enough. Has this been said before too many times? Is this really going to make an impact? And I did a pretty good job of like, okay, just shut that down. Just don't. And again, those PQ reps that I was talking about, that's a good way to kind of shift that. Because it's just what we call saboteurs that are just having a little field day in your left brain, just saying, oh, you suck at this. You can't do
Yeah.
this. What are you thinking?
Right.
So yeah.
So I asked this question because so many people, that's where they start with me, is they've got this idea, they feel really motivated, they're called to write it, but they're terrified that it's not going to matter to anybody and it's not going to be relevant. There's not going to be anybody on the other side of it, right? And then you get to the other side and it couldn't be further from the truth that you originally told yourself. So I asked you that because here you are now, you had this fabulous book signing, 75 people showed up with a line out the door for 2 hours. You had enough sales to reach Amazon bestseller status,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so the internal story, the saboteur, I like to call them the inner critic, or mine show up as twins, doubt and fear. And
Oh.
they show up to the party like they're the relatives that I'm estranged from that somehow found out I was, having a shindig and they've let themselves in.
Like, we're gonna make you feel like crap.
Yeah, exactly. I like to say that they drag me down to the basement and tie me up with duct tape and shove a sock in my mouth while they just spew at me. Um, and but then it's like your book comes out, you reach the one person, then the two people, then the 10 people, then the 20 people, right? And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I never considered how many people I would impact because I was
Mhm.
so busy the whole time beating down the voice that told me I would impact nobody, right?
Yeah.
And then there ends up being many bodies
Yeah.
of people, right?
Absolutely. And people who you wouldn't even think too, and then
Yeah,
I mean people like from high school that who I've connected with on Facebook, and we'll sometimes chat and stuff, but who will post a picture with my book and that they read it, and then they would post a review on Amazon and just say how awesome it was and how it just really was just having a brain fart on what they said, but how it impacted them, I guess, bottom line. And it's just so amazing and kind of surreal because you're like, wow,
yeah,
wow. Just, because you're living and breathing this. I mean, by the time you finish your book, you have been thinking about this for so long. You're just
yeah.
like,
You're exhausted.
everybody knows this.
Yeah,
Everybody's heard this. No, they haven't. Some people might, but not everybody, So
yeah.
again, it's that imposter syndrome.
Or they've heard it, but they haven't heard it in the way that you have said it, right?
True,
Because that's really what it
true,
comes down to. There aren't really any brand new ideas, really, or new
true.
stories, but we are all different in how we would share a story or a perspective, or how we would teach somebody the thing that. And so different voices for different folks, different strokes for different folks, basically,
Right.
right? Like somebody else could have read a book that has similar themes in it as yours, but not gotten anything. But because of how you put it, or the story that you shared, or the way that you instructed on a PQ, or some other exercise or whatever resonated, right? Or
Hmm.
something in your story
Exactly.
that you shared about the 26 years in corporate resonated more with them than the other person whose book said something similar but didn't resonate for whatever reason. um so it's really about sharing your unique voice and perspective and not being afraid to say something that's already been said,
Hmm.
but know that you can say it differently, and that makes it just as good, sometimes better.
Absolutely. Yeah,
you know
absolutely. That's such a good point. Such a good point.
so where tell us, so from burnout to best life,
Mhm.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, other distributing channels. What else do you want to tell them about your book?
So if you purchase the book, you will get, well, anybody watching today too, there'll be a link to a downloadable workbook that goes with it. And it's a really great thing to work on, especially at this time of the year, because it's about setting a crystal clear vision for your life and walking through steps on how do you do that. And then, what's your why, which again is not a new concept, but for some people are like, well, I don't know. And then, how to really then formulate that vision statement and then break it down into goals. So it's a really good starting point, especially for this time of the year. And the book also, at the end of every chapter, has reflection questions. So if you know that you have some pain points that need to be addressed, it's a kind of a great way to zero in and say, okay, you know what, this is where I need to focus. So it's helpful that way. So did that answer your question? I felt like
Beautiful.
random.
Instructional and applicable and informative and all of the wonderful things that we want books that are teaching us how to transform our lives to do. And the other thing that she wants to say is go buy it. So okay, I'm doing it for her. So in the description, the show notes, we will put the link to the book. We'll be there. And then, as Lisa said, if you purchase the book, you get a copy of the workbook, the free workbook, right? So Lisa, where should people connect with you? So obviously we want them to go check out your book, but where else should they go kind of follow you? Where are you hanging out? Where do you want them to come and see what you're all about?
So good question. My website's probably the easiest way to start, which is lisahammett.com. That's really tough to remember. And so I'm on most social media. I'm not on TikTok. I know I probably should be, but I'm not. But LinkedIn is really my main handle. And I post a lot of educational content on LinkedIn, but I'm also have a pretty big presence on Facebook, Instagram, and then I'm on Twitter and YouTube. That's something in the new year. I'm going to kind of overhaul my YouTube and some opportunity there. Yeah.
I had an intern help me with that this fall semester because I was like, I know it stinks. Like somebody else has got to spend some time with this, loving on it. Cool. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on to Open Book Broadcast. We wish you so much success with the launch of this book. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for catching the replay, if that's what you're doing. Check out all the other videos in the YouTube channel, especially in the Open Book Broadcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.